I do not eat a lot of carbohydrates. The carbohydrates that I do eat, I'm extremely selective about. Most of my calories come from protein, a little bit from fats, and a little bit from carbohydrates. But the carbohydrates that I do choose, I pick with a lot of scrutiny. And the ones that I'm going to list off, these 9, were ones that I wouldn't have even touched 7, 8, 9 years ago. But now, knowing what I know today and how I live my life and how I apply carbohydrates to specific situations, this is what I eat. Number 1, blueberries. First of all, I love them. I eat a ton of blueberries. I particularly choose wild blueberries because they're lower sugar content. They're not completely just adulterated to turn into something the size of a tomato. They're just what a blueberry should be. And the main reason I eat them is they make my brain feel good. And I don't necessarily think that it's the carbohydrates making my brain feel good, because I don't get this way with other carbohydrates. I firmly do believe that the anthocyanins, the polyphenols that are in blueberries, have a powerful impact on the brain. And the research really does tend to back that up. I also get a lot of gut benefit when I eat blueberries. I feel like my digestion is good. Maybe it's the just basic fiber in it, but also the polyphenols. People don't realize that polyphenols feed the gut microbiome. Polyphenols are, in a way, sort of a fiber to begin with. So when do I eat blueberries? Well, blueberries might be something that I eat if I feel like I need a little bit of brain performance throughout the day. I typically film fasted, but then as the day goes on, I do add some food in. So blueberries and some cottage cheese, usually something that I'd eat in the middle of a filming day. Number 2 is watermelon, which sounds crazy because as far as glycemic index, it's a pretty high glycemic carbohydrate. But the glycemic load over the amount of volume that you actually get is quite low. If I'm going to consume carbohydrates during a workout, it's going to be watermelon. Why? Because I get a lot of volume without a lot of calories, but I also get something that absorbs fast, and because it happens to be the perfect ratio of sugar to hydrating aspect. So with that, I can consume some watermelon and I actually feel like I'm getting adequate hydration. People don't always realize this, but you don't need carbohydrates to become hydrated. You don't need to eat carbohydrates if you're physically active. You don't need them. Your body will create them. Okay, it does something to the brain, it does something to the body if you have a little bit around training. But when it comes to hydration, you do get more hydration if carbohydrates are in the equation, because glycogen is going to help you hold water. So I find that watermelon is a great way to hydrate if I'm training later in the day. Plus, I just like the taste of it. Number 3 is going to be purple sweet potatoes. Now, sweet potatoes in general, but I opt for purple sweet potatoes more than anything. Now, when I was hardcore keto all the time, sweet potatoes were just not a part of my life until I started carb cycling maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So sweet potatoes were something that I enjoyed earlier in life, but I really had to stay away from them. Now I've realized that they are quite honestly a superfood, but I also learned some other things. I learned that the orange sweet potatoes don't have as rich of antioxidant profiles as the purple ones do. And if I'm going to have some carbohydrates and I'm going to time it right, I'm going to get the most bang for the buck. So the Okinawan sweet potatoes, the ones that are also known as Hawaiian, those are the ones that have the deep, deep purple color on the inside. Those are the most antioxidant rich ones that you can find. Also the Stokes purple sweet potatoes, those are the ones that have purple on the outside and purple on the inside. There was an interesting study that took a look at the flesh color, and it found the deeper, the darker the flesh color of a sweet potato, the higher the antioxidant content. And we're not talking like little negligible things. We're talking anthocyanins, we're talking chlorogenic acid, we're talking really potent antioxidants. If I am going to have orange sweet potatoes, I'm going to go for the ones that are a little bit darker, like the red garnet sweet potatoes. Those are the ones, a lot of times you'll find them. You'll see if you're at the grocery store, it'll say red garnet. Those have the deepest, darkest orange, super high beta carotene content. But the big reason I eat them is my gut feels tremendous when I do. And they're relatively low glycemic, they're easy for me to control, and they're doing some benefit outside of just fiber. The number 4 carbohydrate that I eat is going to be a red potato. It's so funny because like you think potatoes, you think really something that's not good. It's a starch, right? But it's such a controllable starch. For example, I can take that potato, I can heat it up, and I can make it extremely high glycemic without having to have rice, without having to have sugar. I can have a glycemic food, high glycemic food that came directly out of the ground that I feel pretty good about eating. And I feel like I can control the amount of insulin spike or glucose spike that I get from it. So when would I typically eat a red potato? That's usually something that I would have like post-workout. Red potato and some fruit might be good carb, what's called backloading. A great way for me to finish a hard workout, replenish glycogen stores, at least to a certain degree. But the other thing that I like about red potatoes is, first of all, they're small and portable. But second of all, I can heat them up and then I can put them in the fridge and make a resistant starch out of them. And the resistant starch has practically, very little glycemic impact and a huge benefit as far as feeding the gut microbiome is concerned, because the starches become indigestible, so the gut bacteria can feed and cross-feed on them. So a huge microbiome effect, and no matter where you stand on the microbiome, what we do know is that diversity is best. So eating foods that improve my gut diversity, and carbohydrates specifically in the case of this video, a resistant starch cooled potato just makes a lot of sense. I also put a link down below for seed. If you're worried about your gut microbiome, you're trying to make some changes. But ultimately, if you're trying to add carbohydrates back into your diet after doing low carb for a long time, very important you take care of your microbiome. So that link down below saves you 25% off of Seed's Daily Synbiotic, which has a prebiotic and a probiotic in one capsule. So a capsule inside of a capsule. Super interesting technology. Very, very cool to check out. So they also fund a lot of microbiome research. So they put their money where their mouth is. A lot of the proceeds go back into research because we're trying to understand what these little microbes in our gut do and how important they are. So anyhow, that makes a big difference. Made a big difference for me. I don't usually recommend probiotics because a lot of them are garbage, but this one's definitely worth a shot. So that link down below is in the top line of the description for Seed. This next one's a curveball. Number 5 is milk, raw milk. This is a food in general, carbohydrate or not, that I probably would not have consumed much even 5 years ago, even 4 years ago. But the research just gets so strong, at least what I'm seeing. And raw milk, I know you can't get it in all states, so I know it's not a fair thing to say to a lot of people that might get kind of frustrated, but raw milk has a lot of potential benefits, especially when you start getting into the immunological side, right? That's really, really interesting stuff. But also, I consider it a carb. People say, oh, it's more protein. I don't know. It's got milk sugar in it. It's a carbohydrate to me. I would never have consumed it doing low carb. Fun fact, and this is not a plug for a sponsor or anything, there is that brand called Fairlife Milk. Max Logavir turned me on to it. It is not raw milk, so you're not getting the same quality, but it is lower sugar and higher protein, and I found it pretty interesting. So he turned me on to it, I tried it. I don't feel as good with that stuff as I do with raw milk, but it's definitely lower carb and higher protein. Next one is honey. If I need something sweet, and I really don't want to have like actual sugar, but I really do want some carbohydrates. A good example would be, again, like if I'm training in the afternoon and I need something to fuel me and I'm in a carb stent, meaning I'm in a phase where I'm okay with having some carbohydrates pre-workout, I will have 1 to 2 tablespoons of honey. I never would have done this before, but check this out. A lot of this, even a year or two ago, I would have been trepidatious, but I found out that honey has a unique kind of sugar in it called trehalose. There was a study published in Nutritional Science and Vitaminology that had subjects consume 10 grams per day of trehalose, the specific sugar in honey, or 10 grams per day of sucrose. The trehalose group actually had lower fasting glucose, actually lowered their fasting glucose from baseline, adding the trehalose in. And the reason is it binds to a specific solute transporter. So it's called solute carrier 2A. It binds to solute carrier 2A and actually blocks the absorption of some carbohydrates. So honey has a net positive effect as long as you keep it in small quantities. So you can't just drizzle 5 tablespoons of stuff on whatever you eat. It's going to be like 1 to 2 tablespoons strategically used, so you're getting 10, 15, 20 grams of carbohydrates at the top end. Next up is lentils and chickpeas. Now, I must digress. Like even 5 or 6 years ago, when I would kind of cycle in and out of keto a little bit in the beginning, chickpea pasta, lentil pasta, these were the things that I implemented first. Because I've always been a pasta guy. I'm Italian, I got fat on pasta, that was me. But lentil pasta and chickpea pasta actually changed the game for me. I was able to have something that was lower glycemic, higher fiber. It made a big difference for me. So I really did like this stuff. But now I would say I have it a couple times per week. Not just the lentil pasta or chickpea pasta. I'll just have straight up hummus. Hummus is a carbohydrate. I wouldn't have had that on keto. But the chickpeas are just too high in starch. But now I feel okay having them. The soluble fiber, and just the fiber content in general, soluble and insoluble, is hard to beat. Okay, we're talking a huge percentage of the actual volume of chickpeas and the actual volume of lentils are actually fiber to begin with. So net, it's a pretty benign carbohydrate to begin with. Sure, there's some anti-nutrient concern if you're worried about that, but by and large, I don't think it's a huge deal. People also don't realize that the antioxidant profile of especially things like red lentils, that red pigment is from a polyphenol. You get antioxidant benefits. It's like eating a fruit. You don't get as much polyphenols as you would, say, blueberries or acai berry, but you get a lot from lentils than you would ever expect. Number 8 is an interesting one. That's butternut squash. People don't think about it, but it's got a lot of utility. People think, okay, I have sweet potatoes too much. I'm sick of sweet potato. You can puree up a butternut squash just like you can puree a sweet potato. You can puree butternut squash with a little bit of parsnip, and it comes out like a tremendous mash. Like it's almost like mashed potatoes. It's tremendous, except it has lower glycemic load and lower glycemic index. And you're also getting quite a bit of polyphenols that you might not get elsewhere from other carbohydrates. So if you want to have like a mashed potato kind of thing, try butternut squash. It's actually quite effective. And the fiber content is second to none, and a lot of water. So when you compare a sweet potato and a butternut squash, like they look similar, they even kind of taste similar, but the starch concentration is about half in a butternut squash. And the last carbohydrate that I consume a lot of now is beets. So I bet you thought that I was going to be talking about rice and tortillas and corn and stuff like that. The carbohydrates that I consume are hardly carbohydrates at all, like really. They're just good, benign, low glycemic carbs. But beets are interesting. They have an antioxidant in them known as betalain, which is very potent, especially when it comes down to cardiovascular disease. So taking care of my heart as far as antioxidant profiles are concerned. But even independent of that, the vasodilation effect of beets. I have been known for years and years to have a little bit of a shot of beet juice occasionally before endurance work, because way back in the day, there was some really wicked cool research that came out surrounding beet juice and endurance performance. That stuck with me. The vasodilation effect, the pumps I get from it are quite cool. And that effect lasts for hours and hours. It's pretty interesting. But also, it's good for the body. It's good to have that vasodilation effect. So are there other carbohydrates that I eat? Yes. I'll have ice cream from time to time. I'll have a rice cake here and there. But these are the 9 carbs, and really only 4 of them, like the blueberries, the watermelon, the honey, the sweet potatoes, and I guess the lentils. So I guess 5. Those are the ones that I really just cycle through all the time. Like you find in my house, you're not going to find a lot of other carb sources. Anyway, as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.